Hello and welcome to the Eurogamer TV show. Coming up in today's episode, it might have been delayed more often than a European console launch, but GSC Game World's ambitious PC shooter S.T.A.L.K.E.R is, finally, due early next year. EGTV embarks on a haunting expedition to the nuclear wasteland of Chernobyl to see how closely the game mirrors its harrowing inspiration. But now, for a very rare and exclusive look behind the scenes at one of the most secretive and fascinating developers in the world. And if the music hasn't given the game away, perhaps this cheeky looking chap might. Welcome to Rare, a purpose-built development facility tucked away in a sleepy idyll deep in the English countryside. It's about as far away from the willy-waving entertainment orgy that is the games industry as you could hope for. But this is the very same shrinking Studio Violet which, during the 80s and 90s, bestrode the industry like a creative colossus, pumping out some of the finest video games ever made. First on home computers as Ultimate, and later as Nintendo's formidable development general on SNES and N64. By now a global superpower out of its own back garden, Rare's apparent Midas touch seduced a smitten Microsoft, armed with Bill Gates' bulging wallet. And, well, we all know the rest.
So what does $375 million buy you? Well, Microsoft, who paid that princely sum for Rare back in 2002, would have been hoping for games like this and this. Whereas initially, what they got was this. And since then, Rare has, in the eyes of many gamers, failed to recapture the magic of old. Until now.
It's party time!
Viva Pinata is an unashamedly cheery, relentlessly cute and strangely hypnotic experience. You take a knackered old patch of land and, through hard graft and careful planning, transform it into a majestic garden paradise teeming with life. It couldn't be more different to the gunmetal grey slaughterfest of Gears of War, Microsoft's other big 360 title this Christmas. But in many ways it's every bit as significant as Epic's murderous blockbuster. Significant for Rare in that it's a genuine return to form, scoring an impressive 8 out of 10 in its Eurogamer review. But also significant for Microsoft as the firm's first serious attempt to tap into the lucrative kids market and broaden the appeal of 360. The Rare complex is split into a series of development barns. Each houses a separate team. The Banjo barn is pointed out to us on request. The rest are state secrets. Don't ask or they'll smother you in your sleep. But we are allowed into the Viva barn, the inner sanctum of 4 years worth of clandestine creation, and a building precious few people outside the team itself have been granted access to before. Yeah, check us out. And here's where we meet key figures from the Pinata team, or as we prefer to call them, Pin's people. Now, interestingly, Viva Pinata didn't start out on Xbox 360, nor Xbox One for that matter, though it resided there briefly. And it wasn't even called Viva Pinata. Confused yet? Well, it began life as an experimental project running on PDA called Your Garden, which you can see for yourselves here in our exclusive screenshot. Lead software engineer Will Bryant was employee number 1 on the title.
The history of the project and starting with the PDA and everything, it was me and an artist who first prototyped that on a mobile phone, and 4 and a bit years ago, right through to Xbox and Xbox 360.
And even though the project was unknown to all but a handful of key employees at first, it quickly became apparent that Rare was onto something.
We'd done the PDA and we'd kind of got a basic thing where an animal would come in and wander around. And then they realised that the idea was kind of bigger than that, and then we started looking at the 3D stuff, and obviously with the Ghoulies kind of team just finishing, we got all their resource of everything that they'd done, and then we got a version working on the Xbox.
The game hinted at its true potential after the shift onto Xbox One, but the Pinata's gloriously unique, and some might say essential, paper-like quality was only made possible with the advent of 360.
One of the ideas was that maybe you could pick one pinata and you get it kind of with all the fur effect on it and everything. But then, as soon as 360 came along, we knew that we could do it on pretty much everything.
Stevenson, fresh from the It's Mr. Pants GBA team, was handed ultimate responsibility for the look of the game's mesmerising menagerie. He flicks through what he calls his Bible, a hefty tome crammed with concept art for every creature in the game, and plenty more that didn't make the final cut. Lefos, the Charlie Dimmock of Pinata Island, is shown here from early sketch to finished article. In the crazy cause and effect world of video games development, every pinata sketched by Stevenson and paper pixelated into the game requires its own stirring, idiosyncratic soundtrack. Step forward veteran Rare tunesmith Grant Kirkhope, he of Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong and GoldenEye fame no less. The Prague Philharmonic Orchestra was enlisted to stretch every string-plucked sinew and flex every brass-trilled muscle to bring Kirkhope's original MIDI recordings to life.
So we kind of turned up in Prague and it was amazing. So I should show you the difference. This is one of the main tunes from Pinata, the way that I did it. And this is the one that came back from Prague when we. Really different. I tell you the difference. It's real people playing real instruments, you know.
But the romance dancers, individually themed mating rituals for each pinata species, required the biggest creative effort. And no genre was safe from Kirkhope's 60-song orgy of procreation pop. Having done the meet and greet, designer Justin Cook is handpicked by Rare's shadowy and camera-shy senior execs to face our more probing questions. And those execs don't come much more shadowy than Tim and Chris Stamper, Rare's co-founder siblings who are understood to have done rather well for themselves out of the Microsoft deal. But with echoes of Miyamoto's Pikmin, their creative presence still looms large, even if it is less hands-on these days.
The original idea was an idea by Tim Stamper. He had a design document that was sent to us, and it came through Greg. And it was just that you have a small area, a garden that was yours, and you attracted wild animals in. I think Tim had been working in his own garden and seeing actual animals come into the garden. Things he planted were attracting new species in, and it was an idea that interested him.
With the full force of the Microsoft marketing machine driving Viva Pinata into stores on the kids bandwagon, there's always the risk that the game's complexity will be missed by those now out of short trousers. Is this a concern?
When we design the game, we design it for us. And we're all, 20 to 30-year-old adults that we want something more out of a game. So we always intend it to be as broad as possible. And the kids thing is kind of it's almost an artificial marketing thing, just so they know where they're aiming at.
On the flip side, Microsoft's pigeonholing of Pinata has produced a spin-off cartoon series to boost its appeal amongst the little uns. Already a hit in the US, the show is expected to air in the UK early next year. But despite the ruthless commercialism of the project, Rare has maintained creative control to ensure the animation is firmly in the spirit of the game.
Franklin, no!
They had access to all the design documents and things were written for the game, and we were already quite well into production, so a lot of the animals have been designed and modelled and animated, and we were able to share all those with the people at 4Kids and eventually Bardell, the animation studio that's doing the show. And it just meant that they could reproduce it as faithfully as possible between the two, although they actually had to add some more stuff to their faces and stuff to give them better speech and movement and things that you need for a character-driven TV show that you don't need for a game. And then we wait for Cartoon Day when the episodes come back and we can watch them.
A cartoon is one way to extend the shelf life of the game. Online is another. And while Viva Pinata hints at the great life potential of the concept, one of the few disappointments is the inability to visit other users' gardens and do unspeakable things in the bushes.
We had plans for some other live features, and I'm sure that you'll hear about more of those as we go on, but yeah, we plan to expand the live aspect of Pinata in future.
Viva Pinata does not exist in a vacuum, of course. Since Rare's £250 million acquisition by Microsoft, and under massive pressure to perform, many critics and gamers were anything but grabbed by ghoulies and left cold by Cameo. A victim of its own success perhaps, but how has Rare been affected by the first extended period of negative press in its history?
It's interesting to read it, and it's it's sad when people don't think that things are going the way, but whenever anybody sets out to make a game here, we set out to make the best game we can at in the time we've got. So we don't consciously decide to make a game that nobody's going to like. In fact, quite the opposite. And it's just disappointing when that isn't the case.
Which means, let's be honest, they must have been bricking it as the game went out for review. But they needn't have worried. And speaking here as the game receives across-the-board acclaim, the epic sense of relief is palpable. Good on you, chaps.
I'm amazed, quite frankly. I was expecting us to kind of be sidelined, because we weren't the mainstream market. And as I say, I'm really thrilled that people have responded so well to it. I mean, we worked really hard. It isn't not deserved, but yeah, I'm just pleased that people have been able to see past the graphics and see that we've put a really meaty game in there.
Get set for Viva Pinata! An ever-changing world full of endless possibilities, because this is a world where you get to call the shots. The world of Viva Pinata is a living, breathing place full of opportunities and unforgettable characters.
The bleak road to Chernobyl is one Eurogamer has travelled along before, albeit without the film crew in tow. Over 2.5 years ago, in fact, when we were whisked away to the Ukraine to preview S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Shadow of Chernobyl, an outrageously ambitious first-person shooter due for release at the time in late 2004. But, having realised its original vision was perhaps too ambitious, a rethink was forced upon developer GSC Game World. Now, with the support and guidance of THQ, the end is finally in sight for the project, a release penciled in for early 2007. The likes of Half-Life 2 and Far Cry have reset expectations for the genre since S.T.A.L.K.E.R. first stunned the gaming world. Has GSC missed its window of opportunity? S.T.A.L.K.E.R. may now lack the wow factor, but the tighter, more focused 2006 model's strongest asset remains unsettlingly intact: its setting. That's why we're back to this inhospitable nuclear wasteland, to see how the game has captured the broken spirit of the scarred landscape and translated it into the exploits of a mercenary operating within the mysterious exclusion zone. Wish you were here? Before we're exposed to the game, THQ seems hell-bent on exposing us to massive amounts of radiation, in the process of getting us literally and metaphorically in the zone. Our tour guide works with the military in the exclusion zone. He briefs us on our journey into the chilling heart of the disaster area. On the road to the power plant, we're startled by the realisation that people actually live here, workers in the main. There's even a hotel. Ideal for that unforgettable romantic getaway. Miles of pipes snake over and around the roadways. The ground is too radioactive to bury them in. Life in the exclusion zone, if you can call it that, is a twisted version of reality. A perfect setting for a video game, you might say.
At 1:23 a.m. on the 26th of April 1986, a massive steam explosion ripped through reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl power plant, leading to meltdown and creating the world's biggest nuclear disaster. The resulting plume of radioactive fallout contaminated not just the surrounding area, but spread right across East and West Europe, reaching the UK, Scandinavia, and its effects were even detected as far as the east coast of North America.
The history and lessons of the tragedy matter hugely to the people who work here. They also matter to the development team. The shadow of the real-life Chernobyl is still cast over ordinary Ukraine citizens. Kiev-based GSC's epic creative struggle is one that is also stiflingly close to home for the team. Geiger counters display readings which we don't understand, but scare us witless anyway. And all the while the awful bulk of the reactor stares us down from a few hundred yards away. We can't help but think there must be a very good reason for having a 30-kilometre exclusion zone. The radiation is still at such a level that it's not advisable to spend more than a few hours here. Real-life stalkers who literally stalked the zone in the aftermath of the disaster were acutely aware of the risk. And for players of the game, this phantom menace is an enemy that must be understood and respected if its dire effects are to be avoided. Unless you fancy being turned into a slavering bulb-eyed mutant. Driving in the opposite direction to the power plant suddenly strikes us as an eminently sensible idea. And we're being taken to one of the key locations that features in the game.
Pripyat, the city closest to the power plant, was hurriedly evacuated the day after the explosion. 20 years on, it remains a bleak memorial to this man-made tragedy. Frozen in time, chilling reminders of everyday life abruptly halted are everywhere.
What the pictures you're seeing can't convey is the deafening silence. The reassuringly constant background hum of metropolitan life is utterly, chillingly absent. But nowhere is the experience of Pripyat more surreal than in the fairground, like a Silent Hill game made real. Disney World it ain't. The city's strange sense of being held in a state of suspended animation is explained by the manner in which the people were evacuated in the aftermath.
Everybody was forced to go outside, to be evacuated. Everybody. 45,000 people were evacuated. A huge queue of buses was driving directly to the Kiev direction. The distance, the length of this queue was 15 kilometers.
GSC researched this location extensively to capture its look and feel for key segments of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Our montage here shows exactly how well the virtual city of Pripyat matches the real one.
Vandals! Left and right!
Any game worth its salt must stand alone on its own merits, of course. But an understanding of S.T.A.L.K.E.R's setting in context unquestionably enriches the gaming experience.
Take cover! They are in the windows! Flash on the roof to the left!
So, a whistle-stop tour of the Chernobyl zone is certainly a privileged introduction into a game where you have to explore the irradiated landscape through the eyes of a stalker. But even that fails to convey what it must have been like to be one of these mysterious individuals on the ground at the time. So, let's go and find one of them. Go, 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 go!
Invited along to the following day's Stalker event, Alexander Naumov was working in the Ministry of Internal Affairs back in April 1986. He recalls, with not a little bitterness, the audacious Soviet cover-up of the disaster.
When I first entered the zone, no one knew what had happened.
The first information we received was from Western enemy radio stations. It was said that there had been an explosion at Chernobyl nuclear power station, but our radio stations broadcast agricultural successes instead.
And this reckless suppression of the truth was to prove fatal for many of those who entered the zone in the aftermath.
The most valuable thing in the world is human life, but back in the days of the Soviet Union, human life was worthless. So thousands of people were taken to the zone as workers and became irradiated. Many people died or are now ill.
Now acting as a guide to the zone, Naumov uses his experiences to educate others and keep the lessons and memories of Chernobyl alive. As just 20 years on, he fears people are already forgetting.
In Pripyat, when the wind goes through the broken windows and doors, it makes a sound like crying. The city is dying, and the memory of it is dying with it. When I see screenshots and trailers of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, I recognize the places I know from real life. So I think that maybe people who play the game and go to Pripyat will remember this city. That's why I like the game. It reminds people about Chernobyl.
The event, hosted by GSC, finally allowed us to go hands-on with S.T.A.L.K.E.R in single and multiplayer. You can read our detailed impressions elsewhere on Eurogamer.net. It's 5 years since this tortuous project's inception. It's no longer the show-stopping technical marvel it was in 2004, but it's now all about the theme, the atmosphere. That's why we just spent a day sprouting a spare pair of nuts in Radiation Land. But will this be enough to win over gamers who, after all, just want a thrilling game experience?
I also kind of understand the feelings of fans who have been expecting the game for so long, whereas like there were promises made to deliver that, and we didn't make that. But I think at that point we a little bit kind of underestimated our powers to do that amount of features and that kind of caliber of a game within that time, because it probably could be 5 games in one.
And despite having the wings of its most outlandish ambitions clipped, the studio remains confident it will still deliver a unique experience.
We tried to convey a different idea with S.T.A.L.K.E.R, where the player would be just a part of that whole universe, and he's just an element which is put into a totally hostile environment, and he tries to actually survive instead of imposing his own rules.
Suggestions that GSC is crudely sensationalising the nuclear disaster carry little weight. The team is simply too close to the tragedy. It's woven into their cultural fabric.
I remember the time of the accident actually, and quite a few of people on the team, they have their parents who used to evacuate people from Pripyat and from all those surrounding areas. And actually the locals, like even people at Chernobyl power plant, we've got fans there. We had the head of Chernobyl power plant coming to our office and playing the game. We made a video of that. So, and he's very supportive, he's a big fan.
After such a lengthy gestation period, it seems slightly perverse then that only PC gamers will enjoy the S.T.A.L.K.E.R experience. A point that, promisingly, Yavorski happily concedes.
Yeah, we're trying to see how the PC version does. I mean, how successful it will be, but we're definitely thinking of doing something with consoles.
Watch this space. For now, though, no one could blame the team for not thinking about anything other than finishing the excruciating development marathon that has consumed their lives for over half a decade.
Well, everybody's kind of desperate to get the game out as soon as possible, of course, because it's been a game of they lived with that. It's really been treated as a child now, so it's for people to prove that they have worked not in vain.
And when that day comes, the drinks are on, Oleg.
We're going to be plastered, all of us, I tell you. Yeah, we'll take a week of drinking holiday.